Hello, and welcome to the Crypto Club and Digital Assets Weekly Catch-Up on Zoom. It is Sunday, the 2nd of April, 2023. And as is always the case, stick around if you want to learn about various things around crypto, blockchain, DeFi, NFTs, ICOs, STOs, TGs, any other three letters really. What we end up talking about will really depend upon who comes along to the session. We hold these events every week on a Sunday evening, 7 p.m. UK time, and they're open to everybody, novice and expert alike. That means sometimes we focus on the more beginner type stuff where we get people who are new to this area, learning about all these terms, we want to understand more. Other weeks we have people who come along and talk about their crypto projects or their blockchain initiatives and share with us what they're working on. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the session. As the YouTubers say, do click on the subscribe, like button, make comments, but more importantly, come along to a future session. Details of how to join are in the link below. So let's see who's going to come and join us today. Aaron, hello.
Hi, nice to meet you, Gary.
Hey, Aaron, good of you to join us.
Yes, I saw the message on the Metaverse WhatsApp group, and I sure, why not? Let me see.
Brilliant. Well, we never know how many people are going to show up to these things. It varies from week to week. And as you saw, I sometimes put a note out onto various groups, whether it's WhatsApp or Telegram or Facebook groups that I'm involved in. So some weeks we get loads of people coming along. We talk about all sorts of stuff, and other weeks it's a little bit quieter. So what brings you along today? What's your interest? Is it on the metaverse side of things then?
For me, I guess it's more anything related to the health aspect because I'm a pharmacist based in London.
Okay.
And I've been, I think I've known you since 2017 through blockchain, to be honest. So when I saw your name, I was like, is that the same Gary? I was like, okay. And then I'm seeing you now. I was like, oh yeah, that's the same Gary from 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so basically now I'm working as a pharmacist. My contract just finished literally on Friday. So I got free reign for the next month or so to try to find a different job role. But in the meantime, I've been trying to see how I could incorporate health application in the metaverse, using NFTs. So like I'm very heavily involved in something called social prescribing,
Okay.
which is basically think of it like dance on prescription, because I'm a pharmacist, but also a dancer. And I'm also the chief metaverse officer for Crump Kings, which is like a 20-year-old entertainment company from America, which specializes in crump dance.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Thank you.
Did you come to one of the events that I hosted in London where we had Dr. I've forgotten who it was now. It was a guy involved in IOTA because he was doing some stuff around prescribing and that kind of thing, I think, in blockchain around about 2017-ish. I don't know if that sounds familiar.
Potentially. I mean, I've done so many things since then, but what some of the events I clearly remember is definitely Blockchain Week, where I had the opportunity to meet. I was like helping out as a volunteer. I think it was 2017, 2018. I can't remember exactly, but that was Dr. Jane Thomason initiative.
Yep.
And I was able to go to a Crypty Kitty event, launch party in London. And then a few blockchain events down, then some also hackathon, because at the time, I think I was part of the British Blockchain Society or something like that. But then I had other commitments, I couldn't commit anymore. But possibly, because I kind of took a break after that to focus on my wedding and then got back slowly into it through the metaverse hype, I guess.
Cool.
And now so yeah.
Well, welcome back. And it's funny, you mentioned Jane Thomason, who's a bit of a legend in the crypto space. She's fantastic. But we've got Nick joined us as well. Nick Spanos. Hey, Nick. A legend in his own right, in fact.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good. Great to see you come and join us today, Nick. How are you?
Pretty good. What's happening?
So we never really know with these sessions. I just open them up to everybody. We don't have kind of a fixed agenda. I just tend to broadcast out to a few WhatsApp and Telegram groups before the session, and we end up talking about anything really. But you've been in this space for a long time, because I recognise your name, if I'm correctly. Do you want to share a bit more for those who may not have heard of you?
Well, I built the Bitcoin Center. It was a live cryptocurrency exchange next to the New York stock market, 2013, in the ground floor of the Satai building. It was like retail level. about 600 square meters where we traded and got a lot of press and did a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know. I worked for Dr. Ron Paul.
Because Rand Paul, he's still pretty active in promoting this kind of space, isn't he?
He ran for president a few times. I've 5 presidential runs. I've been the senior advisor on 5 different races.
Wow. Okay.
But I came from technology, political technology history.
Okay. Because who else was it who was in the crypto space who also ran for president a few years ago? A guy with a cowboy hat.
Yeah, Charles worked on Dr. Paul's campaign.
Okay.
Charles Hutch.
No, not Charles. Not Charles, because he's doing Cardano and that kind of stuff now. Pierce. I'm trying to remember now. It'll come back to me later on anyway. But it seems like the Pierce Brock. That's Brock Pierce. That's the one. Yeah. Because he was quite active in the crypto space, and he ran for president as well, didn't he? Was it 2016ish or something like that?
2020.
2020, as recent as that. Okay. Well, anyway, Nick, great to see such a well-known name in this kind of space come into this group. Feel free to join in, share anything. We have these totally open to everybody, so we get a real mixture of novices, experts, that kind of thing come along. So I just welcome along, and we talk about whatever people want to talk about. There's so much going on in the blockchain, crypto, DeFi space and everything. It's hard to kind of constrain us. I see we've just been joined by Stephen as well. Hi, Stephen.
Oh, well, I joined a couple of weeks ago, if you remember. And I had some time, so I thought I'd, hook up and see what's going on, see where the conversation goes.
Cool. Excellent. Well, the conversation's going to go where any of you guys want to go. So, Nick, I know you're an absolute star in this space and you've probably got all sorts of insights. Aaron and I, we actually discovered go back to 2017-ish, thereabouts, when I was doing some stuff around blockchain, certainly in London, that kind of thing. So it's really up to you folks. If there's anything you want to talk about, any particularly hot topics going on, as long as it's kind of crypto related, that works with me. So if anyone's got any questions or anything they want to share, it's a good time to do it. And please do not go for it, Aaron.
First of all, thank you, Nick, for joining in. Sorry, I'm such a noob in this space, so I had to quickly go on LinkedIn to look at your profile. And indeed, like Gary said, you're a legend in this space. So then he puts the camera on. So hi everyone. So basically, quick recap. Like I was saying to Gary, I'm a pharmacist based in London. Been involved in blockchain space since 2017, but then took a break from it. But I think the reason why I was like, okay, let me take the lead for this conversation is that today I went to a conference organized by SNOMED. And basically, for those that may not be aware what SNOMED is, think of it like a hashtag for clinical system used by doctors across the globe. It's like a 30-year-old company. And basically, every time you go and see a doctor for any medical condition, they code it accordingly to what you say to them. So if you have asthma, they use a read code and so on. And many people are not aware what SNOMED is including me, until I started working in a GP surgery as a pharmacist, helping out the doctor. But basically, the reason why I'm kind of raising the flag here is that I was joining a meeting and they were talking about FIRE. And I think FIRE is very commonly used in America, which I think, Nick, might be relevant to you. And I said, okay, so it's great that you including SNOMED and FIRE, but have you considered to include like blockchain, Web3, metaverse? And one of them responded that no, they haven't considered, but it might be worth to have a follow-up talk to kind of see how they can assist you. And I think, Nick, might be really relevant to you is that they were saying that both SNOMED and IPS is free. So basically, SNOMED as a whole, they provide the terminology, and IPS is basically something I came across today, which is an international patient summary, which kind of provide a basic blueprint for any company developers to take on board to develop their own product. And I think there's a huge opportunity, especially with SBTs, where patient data can be held as a passport, and then leveraging SNOMED terminology and the international patient summary is going to unlock a new market, in my opinion. But I just thought to point out there that I kind of raised the flag for our space at the meeting, and they were open to it. I actually did an email to the person to kind of do a follow-up conversation with them. So
Yeah. Well, in the States, you have all these rules and stuff for medical information, unless it's a COVID vaccine slip, I guess. But it's a difficult nut to crack. As a matter of fact, at one time I had 30% of all the world blockchain patents, and one of them was medical records on the blockchain. But I think people have to. There should be a global system, and everyone should have a private key and sign off on the records that the doctor has his private key, and then you just sign off, and it becomes immutable, and it's on there, but doesn't have your name. It's pseudonymous, right? So get around everything, and you could probably sell that data to researchers. I don't know.
I think there's always a challenge with that, isn't there? Because you've got a thing in the US called HIPAA, which is the healthcare informatics patient data type thing. I can't remember what the 2A stand for, but there's a whole range of limitations on what you can and can't do with patient data in that. And then you've also got, you're talking about the coding, at least the coding's international, because I think everyone uses what are known as ICD-10 codes for disease diagnosis. So yeah, it goes back to, I still remember some of my pharmaceutical stuff. And so the good thing on that, at least, is that I think the WHO, so the World Health Organization, maintain the list of ICD-10 codes. So at least you've got consistency of diagnosis. But in terms of patient records, as Nick says about holding data pseudo-anonymously, that's kind of a start. But I think for some of the regulators, that's not enough. They want it to be totally anonymous, and there's a real world of pain otherwise. So it's a fascinating area. Having worked on a number of blockchain supply chain related projects, which effectively, that's what healthcare is. It's supply chain. It's about people and products, but they're both items that you can track and trace and this kind of thing. But how you store the data is how people get it wrong sometimes, because they sometimes put personal data on the blockchain, which is a world of pain, as opposed to having a reference to the person in some way which you can remove. But Nick, I don't know, with the stuff that you get involved in these days, is it mainly on the crypto side of things or on the blockchain side of things or beyond that now?
Well, I don't know. Whatever, everything. Yeah,
okay, that's fine. I'm sorry, I just see we're joined by Elena as well. Hey, Elena.
Hi, everyone. Nice
Elena is our resident regular who comes along and asks fantastically interesting questions.
Looking forward to my opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah. Well, you got a couple of kind of experts in their own right on today. That you've got Nick Spanos. If you go and Google him, I'm sure he's too modest to admit to the level of depth of expertise he has, but he's something of a true legend and someone I highly respect. Aaron, we met a few years ago. He's involved in kind of like patient type data and medical and healthcare type stuff, I guess. But is it on the prescribing side of things you're interested in, Aaron, or clinical trials, or where's your passion lie?
For me, it's literally the complete opposite, because I'm a pharmacist, but I'm also a dancer. So I've been championing social prescribing for the past 7 years or so, which is like, basically think of it, dance on prescription, and I actually wrote a book on the topic. And then I fell down in a rabbit hole, which kind of someone said to me, what you're trying to do is basically social prescribing. I was like, what's social prescribing? And I'm actually the CEO of International Social Prescribing Pharmacy Association. And through that, I'm just working directly with some people at the WHO and NASP, which is the National Academy for Social Prescribing, and also GSPA, which is a Global Social Prescribing Alliance. So basically, the way I look at it is definitely how we can take dance classes, music classes in the blockchain, so that when the patient do go to the classes, everything is recorded to show that the level of improvement is from those classes. Because right now, we only have saying the patient went to a dance class and I think he's feeling better, but it's not recorded anywhere. So there's no way to kind of validate that the dance intervention led to an improvement in his health and well-being. And that's why when I did the Flow Hackathon a few weeks back with my boss, we created something called Idol, which is International Dance of Legend, which is like a dance NFT marketplace concept. And also within that is to allow to get referral from dancers, students, to get dance classes to improve their health and well-being. So that's kind of the selling USP of the marketplace is someone can self-refer to the dance teacher because they're feeling lonely or have mental health issue. So for that, we called it a social prescribing self-referral. So I'm bringing my expertise in social prescribing into the dance NFT marketplace. So to answer your question, Gary, I'm like, anything holistic, yeah, anything medicine, I'm like, not my cup of tea.
So are you plugging into the likes of the people who keep spamming me at the moment, because I clicked on one of their adverts, was Whoop. And for those who don't know, Whoop, it's a healthcare tracker. So it's like, a Fitbit or whatever. But all of these devices these days are capturing all sorts of data on your heart rate, respiration, perspiration, aspiration, this kind of thing. Is that the kind of stuff that you can plug into to actually record that they're doing stuff? Or are you asking the end user to enter, what they're doing and how they're feeling kind of thing?
Well, I guess with the variable trackers, they kind of look in the biometric of the patient, which is perfect for a clinical assessment by the doctor, the pharmacist or the nurses. But mine is more looking at the social connectedness of the patient itself, because the variable tracker are only tracking the biometric. They're not looking, is that person interacting with another human being? Is that person having fun? Is that person having a walk in the park? So I'm not saying it's not relevant. It's important. But when we're looking at the bigger picture, the topic more specific is SDOH, social determinant of health, like the financial aspect of the patient, the housing situation of the patient, if they have any gambling problem. And I think there's a startup in America called Reputable Health that's like doing something similar, where patients can sell their data as a marketplace. But in terms of variable tracker, I guess the closest one would be Genopets, which kind of measure your step that you make each day, and then you can level up your Genopet, which is like a Pokemon type, to promote the concept of move to earn. And then there's also a Sweatcoin. But for me, it's not aligned to what I do. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's no social prescribing initiative in Web3. And that's what I've been trying to champion it for the past 14 months. And I'm getting that slowly, step by step.
So you're looking at a more holistic perspective, really, of beyond the prescribing and more towards the, as you say, the social aspect of the human side of the human being, really.
Yeah, because right now the healthcare system is broken because they're waiting for the person to be unwell before providing a medical treatment. And with the current level of care, by 2030, there'll be like 18 million healthcare workers shortage. So that's why we need to shift the approach from reactive to proactive to prevent the person from becoming ill in the first place. And we can definitely catch the person before the health deteriorate by looking at the social aspect. For example, if I have a broken window during winter's time, I'm more likely to experience chest infection as a result, especially if I'm 80, 70 years old. But if we get someone to come to the patient house, in UK, we call them link worker. And recently there was an article done across 24 countries, 14 an expert, and we refer the link worker as a connector. There's like a study done, it's called COSP, Common Understanding of Social Prescribing, where you have the connector coming to the patient house, find out that person has broken windows, and contact the housing association to fix that person broken window. But being as a pharmacist, I would only see the person getting antibiotic for chest infection. But we could have prevented that by fixing that person broken window, right?
So, Aaron, let's pick up on that, because there is a crypto kind of connection that delved in there in some ways. Because I completely agree with you. We don't actually have a healthcare service. We have an illness care service, exactly as you say. And I'm a firm believer that actually if we keep people healthy, they don't need to go and see anybody. But how do you use an NFT to achieve any of this? Because you're talking about having an NFT on there in some way, tokenizing something.
I mean, there's an NFT part, but the thing I believe is going to really help scale up social prescribing is SBTs, where you have the patient health data. which is like fixed and cannot be shifted. And when I went to a training event for pharmacists, I was shocked to find out that it's like 70% of medical error happen when the person is discharged from the hospital into primary care. And for people, it is called primary care, I mean basically doctors, pharmacists, and so on. And what happened is the discharge paper is scanned and sent by email to the GP practice, and it's not even OCR recognized. So basically, when I was working as a clinical pharmacist, I had to look at the letter, manually write the information into my clinical system, in your case, in the EMIS or System 1, the most popular one. And that's when things can miss out. But instead, if you had a SBT of the patient, which get with them at every single touch point in primary care, secondary and tertiary care. So when they get discharged from the hospital, the clinician asks the permission of the patient to access the medical record, feed in data saying that this medication has been stopped and the new medication has been increased and initiated. So when that person gets discharged from the hospital into primary care, there's only one single version of the truth. Therefore, the GP can say, can I look at your SBT and look, oh, okay, so you've been stopping this medication. So I'm not going to give you another prescription for that. Let me initiate a new prescription. Because what's happening, which is shocking, is that the hospital has up to 2 weeks to provide a discharge letter to the GP surgery. Between that, patient harm can occur. But if we had SBT in place, so I'm talking like in the ideal world, it'll be instantaneous. And likewise, in UK, they started a service called the Discharge Medication Service for community pharmacies, where every time the patient gets discharged from the hospital, they send an email to the pharmacies in which the patient is nominated or registered with, but they're not sending the same email to GP surgery. So us as community pharmacists, because I work both in industry, community pharmacy, and clinical, is that when the prescription gets sent to community pharmacy, I have to manually check as the medication list has been updated, which is a waste of time and resources. And this could be all avoided by having one single version of truth, which is the SBT or the NHS SBT, right? So I hope Gareth answered your question.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I was briefly involved in, there was a massive, in the UK, we've got the National Health Service, the NHS, and I think it was about 15 years or so ago now, there was a massive program which was, well, it was at NHS PFIT, which was the NHS program for IT, and it had what was called an EPRD, I think it was, an electronic patient record. And one of the challenges with it is that people think, oh yeah, we'll just make the electronic record, we'll make patient records electronic and we'll provide access, blah, 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 blah. It was an absolute political nightmare. Because people don't realise that in the UK, we've got this thing called the NHS, which actually is a thing made up of over 1,000 legal separate entities, each of whom have got their own priorities, their own politics, their own power plays. Doctors think they own your records. Clinicians think they own your records. It was just an absolute nightmare. And eventually, the UK government spent, I think it was £11 billion on the programme before they abandoned it. And that, bizarrely enough, is probably one of the better things they've ever done. That they realised they were getting nowhere. They'd already spent £11 billion and it was going nowhere. And it was this whole thing of, oh yeah, single version of the truth. You have the electronic record centrally, blah, 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 which is where it's kind of nice where we're going with Web3 and self-sovereign digital identity. This concept, at least, that the person who owns the patient data is the patient is great in theory. It's going to be interesting to see whether the doctors support that or not. So yeah, Aaron, anything you're doing in that space, I think is brilliant. And as is always the case, and maybe Nick will know, having as you're saying that they have the patents in this space. Electronic patient records, the problem isn't usually technology. It's usually politics in some way. And by that, I don't mean Conservative, Labour, Democrat, Republican. It's power politics within and across organisations. So I wish you well with that. Well, thanks for sharing that, Aaron. Really interesting. And do keep us up to date with anything that goes on with that. Because it's certainly an admirable thing. And you mentioned, was it SBD, SBT? I just wanted to make sure we have the letters right.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Gary, for your support. And yes, I definitely support. And it's highly political. I mean, I can definitely relate working with the GP surgery as a PC pharmacist. SBT is for soul-bound token. That's what I meant.
Soul-bound token.
Yes, it's basically NFT that cannot be transferred to somebody else.
Sorry, a transferable NFT. Okay. Always interesting. It's interesting because Elena was asking the other week, we've heard about fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens, and now we're beginning to hear about semi-fungible tokens, which sounds like another marketing type thing. But I guess Ethereum, they've got the ERC 1155 standard, but I thought that was a mix. It wasn't actually semi-fungible, but I don't know that space well enough. I don't know.
And there's a 998 as well, I think.
A 998. Okay. Because all I know is on Ethereum, you had ERC20, which is fungible, ERC 721, which was non-fungible, and 1155, which was I think that's a collection.
So it's effectively a way of aggregating almost NFTs into a portfolio, as I understand it. So you can have one kind of almost like a fund of kind of funds, or it's a portfolio of assets. So you have one NFT token which represents the portfolio of underlying NFTs. That's the way I understand it.
I think that ties in with what was describing. Was it means that you could have a single NFT to represent ownership of an art gallery, and then within the art gallery you've got NFTs representing the individual artworks. So it's kind of a collection time. Okay, thanks for sharing that, Steve. It's really interesting on that. Nick, I don't know, do you get involved in the NFT side of things at all?
Well, taking a picture of something and trying to sell it as NFT doesn't really tickle my fancy, but if it has functionality, of course, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's what the blockchain's all is. It's called non-fungible token, but it's just a hash, to prove something. And if it's a location of where you can own some code, doing some work, I think that's great.
Yeah, I kind of find it fascinating, the whole blockchain and crypto world, that you get these kind of hypes, so whether it's CryptoKitties originally, or we've now got NFTs with, as you say, like digital artwork and Bored Ape Yacht Club and that, you get all this froth. Or at least what that froth and excitement does is it gets people working on the technology and helps to improve it over time. So yeah, it's a bit frustrating when you see some of the silly things people are doing, but you realise that I describe it a bit like the Californian gold rush, that it's not about finding the gold ingots, it's about improving the railroads for other people to then build on in the future.
The NFTs brought in a lot of people that probably wouldn't come in because it's, I don't want to say, it's a low barrier to entry process wise mentally. Yep. It's low. Trying to explain the whole blockchain and blah, blah, blah. It's easier for them to say, oh, this is, and you get to own this in the digital world. So just that one statement that people can own something that is digitally scarce in comparison to what we've always had was digital abundance, right? You just keep copying it and it exists. I think just that the one statement that it's scarce and it's digital is the door opener in the brain to take in information. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I think sometimes it's like blockchain. The thing that originally got me excited by it was when I realized that actually it's all about a network or software protocol. And protocols are really, really boring, but are game changing. HTTP, SMTP, TCP/IP. They're just protocols, communication channels, and that. But they're game changing when they're used. So I love the space. That's really good. And Elena, I don't know how you're going with your journey at the moment. You started the course with Nicosia, haven't you, by now?
Yeah. And slowly but inevitably is doing it. So yeah.
Yeah. Are things beginning to make sense?
A little bit, not 100% yet, We'll get there.
I recommend it for people who are perhaps newer to this area, but want a good understanding of digital currencies, digital assets, crypto, wallets, all this kind of stuff. Then the University of Nicosia do a free, what's called a MOOC, a massive online course, runs over, I think it's 12 or 13 weeks or something. It's a term anyway. And it's part of, it kind of feeds into the master's degree on digital or financial digital assets or something. I forgot what the title is now. But it's really good because they've got guest lecturers like Andreas Antonopoulos and a few other people who actually know what they're talking about generally in this kind of space. And it really goes deep into some of the things, probably way more than you really need, but it gives you a great foundation. So that's really good. Great. So how many weeks into it are you now, Elena?
8 weeks.
8 weeks. Okay.
Out of
so,
yeah.
12, and then you've got an exam at the end of it.
There will be one. Well, I'm not obliged to take it, but I will.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, and the great thing about the course as well is that if you pass the course, you then get evidence that you've passed the course on the blockchain. So that they actually give you a link to, I think it gets written onto the Ethereum blockchain, so that there is actually proof of examination or proof of certification or whatever, which again is one of these things that I guess, as Nick was saying about NFTs, you know, some of them are just like digital art, but the concept of being able to use a blockchain with an NFT as a register in some way, which you can go back to, can be quite a powerful thing. That's good. Great. Well, Lou, we've kind of flown along. We've already been, well, probably I've been chatting for 30 minutes already. I just wanted to open it back up if anyone's got any questions or anything they'd like to share today.
I've got a little question. From 15 minutes back.
Elena, for those who may remember Inspector Columbo, the American detective series where Columbo would be in the room with the suspect and he'd be asking them various questions, then he'd go quiet. And then he'd say just at the end, just one last thing. Elena kind of does that of, you know what you said 20 minutes ago. So go for it, Elena.
Oh, thank you. During the conversation between Aaron and Gary, there was something came up, and I would like you to explain it to me. Gary, you said that it's always been a pain to put personal information on the blockchain, but I've always been thinking that blockchain is an immutable way to store information, and in future we will be storing our everything, our medical records, university transcripts, birth, marriage certificates, and property certificates, everything. So if it's a good practice to only put a reference to a personal information on blockchain, then what happens if, in theory, someone decides to buy a house and they want to check the information of the previous owner on the blockchain and it's not there, there is only a reference to the previous records, but they lead to a missing, to page 404. What happens then? So in one way, it's great to store personal information on blockchain because it's immutable, but then it contradicts because you are saying it's not a good way.
Okay, so I'll quickly offer two things, and then I'll open it up for other people's viewpoints. The first thing is actually, it's not a pain to put personal data on a blockchain. In fact, it's really easy. It's a pain if you do it because of legal constraints. So I mentioned HIPAA in the USA, which is healthcare regulations around data. You've also got things like GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulations. In some countries, it might be known as the Data Protection Act. In the USA, again, you've got things around what called PII, so personally identifiable information. And it's all about when you put data into a database, some regulations limit either how it can be accessed or if it can be deleted. So you'll hear in Europe and in the UK about a thing that's called the right of deletion or the right of erasure. And it's enshrined in one of the articles that you've got legal right to request that your personal data is removed from any organization's data. I notice I say you've got the legal right to request it, not necessarily you've got the legal right to have it deleted. And there's a subtle difference there. But the problem is, if it turns out that you do have a legal right to have that data deleted, if it's now in an immutable form, you can't delete it. And so the way around that typically is that rather than having your data on a blockchain, the blockchain acts as a kind of a catalog, an index, a pointer to somewhere else where it is deletable. So in the event that you do have the data deleted, you either set a flag to say this is no longer accessible or whatever, but you do that on the end data, not on the blockchain. That takes us on to the second part, where I said there are two pieces on this. And this is the challenge that people working on blockchain distributed ledger projects always have of how do you maintain consistency between the digital realm of a blockchain and the physical world? Because as you say, you can have things like property ownership, title deed transfer, changes of records, and all that kind of thing. And that's never quite been ever fully resolved. There are companies who've worked on things like biometric identity, for example. So inject yourself with a device which proves who you are, what you are, link that into a blockchain, all that kind of thing. But ultimately, a blockchain can only record what it's told to record, and there's no easy way of authentication that whether that's correct, but more importantly, that it's still correct. So you see things, there's loads of projects at the moment around, I'm seeing a massive growth in real estate. People are talking about doing real estate on the blockchain and land registry and all this kind of thing. And there may be some problems with that, which maybe we can go into later. But I don't know, anyone else got any other views? Have I missed anything or got the wrong end of things?
Maybe I could jump in and just say, I'm not a tech person in pharmacies, right? But I think maybe zero knowledge proof could help address that, because we don't need to know the full details, just like a binary response, yes or no, right? So in the health aspect would be, is that person diabetic? Yes or no? No? Okay, provide the medical treatment. So in a nutshell, the data is not in the blockchain, but it kind of confirm binary response, which could help address the GDPR situation, in my opinion.
That's a great one, actually. For those who don't know, zero knowledge proof is a way of proving you know the answer to something without giving the answer to something. The simplistic way I do it is, if I go into a bar to buy a drink, they don't need to see my passport, see my date of birth. They just need to know that I'm old enough to have alcohol. That kind of. Stephen, were you going to add something as well there?
So on the GDPR thing, I mean, I think that's this is one of the most interesting points, the right to be forgotten, and how this immutable technology works with that. I think broadly you knocked it on the head, which is that, and that's the way I've thought about it. That's the way that actually I've had it confirmed by lawyers as well, which is that, you have some kind of codification of your identity on the blockchain, which references a data set, which contains your real information. And as and when you want to be deleted, then, you have to have some kind of flag in that raw data set that then says, this person has requested the right to be deleted, no longer there. So I think, that's a critical hurdle that, and one of the problems that you have within sort of, regulated financial services, certainly, around this. So that's really what I would add to that. Yeah. And I'll jump in a little bit more on the real estate side of things, because I've actually got some experience of that as well.
Go for it.
Well, has the question been answered sufficiently for Elena there? I guess we should probably make sure that's the case before we move on to something else.
Elena, it's a question for you, really. Did that answer sufficiently what you were asking?
Well, I'm happy with the answer. Thank you.
Well, I tell you,
there's always a lot of information for me, so I'm very grateful for that.
yeah, I mean that's a real value-added piece of information, because most people actually, or a lot of people I've come across haven't really even thought about that issue. So you raise a really valid point. Making something work in the real world has to deal with these kind of rules and regulations, and these are the kind of the practical aspects that need to be understood better. So it's a critical point.
It's an interesting as well. I remember a few years ago, there was a company in Australia who said that they'd solved this problem of immutability by they actually filed a patent for a rewritable blockchain. And I remember, I think it was Reuters asked me for a comment on that. I said, "Oh, we've had rewritable blockchains for years. They're called databases." And they did actually quote me on that, so it's kind of interesting. Well, but Stephen, I don't know, yeah. Nick, first of all, just give you an opportunity. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add on any of that about immutability or anything.
Yeah, database, rewritable blockchain.
Yeah.
Well, I think people are not ready to accept immutability. Society is very ready to accept immutability. And that's that. I mean, I think if it was a couple hundred years ago, they'd be jumping up and down for the immutability. But it's just starting to change, and that's what I think.
Yeah, well, I guess we actually had immutability a few hundred years ago. If you travel around graveyards in the UK, you've still got gravestones which have got people who have born and died, and it's got details, and that's lasted several hundred years. I guess technically you could go along with a chisel and edit it or whatever, but yeah. And it's funny as well, we talk about, the right to be forgotten, but if you write data to a write-only CD drive or to a CD, if anyone remembers what they were, which is awful, let's say, if anyone remembers what they were, and that's within the last 20 years, that was write-only. You couldn't edit those. So, yeah, an interesting thing. Okay, Elena, hopefully that's given you some things to think about. And as you well know, we do record this, so you can always look back at the replay and go through it a few times. Stephen, you're going to talk about real estate then?
Well, I can do. I mean, I think you raised it, and it's interesting that there have there seem to be an increasing number of discussions and groups working to tokenize what they call real world assets. Now, what's interesting about this is I was involved, 3 or 4 years ago, trying to create in a business that was trying to create security tokens, which were very, similar conceptually. And they seem to have almost been rebranded. They're no longer called security tokens anymore. They're called, real world assets. But what strikes me is that all the same problems that existed still exist today. Namely, how do you cross the regulatory and the legal barriers which come about from different jurisdictions, laws around securities, laws around assets. And who they can be created by and who they can be sold to. And I don't think, any of those issues have really changed dramatically over the last 3 years. There's been some progress in certain areas about what constitutes, recognition in law. UK's done quite a lot of work on that and is still doing that. But the regulatory confusion, I think, still remains. The thing that strikes me, and I guess for the benefit of people, if they haven't looked at this, the only way you can really put real estate on a blockchain is if you first of all put it in another structure, and then you put that structure, you have a structure which can be unitized. Maybe that's a company, you sell shares, you sell bonds. Maybe it's a fund, you sell units in those funds. You can't actually put the physical property ownership on a blockchain. For instance, in the UK, not many people know this, but you can only have 4 legal owners of a physical building. So by definition, there's not a lot of point in putting 4 people on a blockchain. I mean, you could do it, and actually that might work, but actually, you can't do it. So you've got to put it in another vehicle. And as soon as you put it in another vehicle, then you run into issues around, the Companies Act. You run issues around prospectus directives and that sort of thing. Yeah. The development which does seem to be interesting and new, and I don't know whether anyone's come across a company called Centrifuge, for example. But what seems to be the interesting development to me, and I haven't quite worked through exactly how it works, is that rather than necessarily selling securities as security tokens, these tokens are created, issued, and then used as collateral. So people they get put into Uniswap's automated market making liquidity pools, for example. And then, someone will effectively, raise money against those. And that's effectively the mechanism, if you like, which seems to be gaining some traction in the space.
Yeah, it's really an interesting space, and it's fascinating as well. I was asked to do some advisory work recently with a firm who said, oh yeah, we're going to do a real estate tokenization project. And one of the first things I said to them was, oh, okay, right. So I'm aware of about 60 real estate tokenization projects that have failed so far. What is it you're planning on doing differently to avoid failure? And their answer was, what do you mean there's been 60 failures? So, okay, have a nice day, bye type thing. They clearly hadn't done the research. But as you say, I didn't think it was only 4. I thought it was 16 in the UK could own a property. But I accept, whatever, it's a small number. But exactly as you say, the way around it typically is you get what's known as an SPV or a special purpose vehicle, so another company to own the property, and then you have tokens which represent shares in that once removed type company type thing. It is one way of doing it, but this is not I'm not offering legal or regulatory advice on that. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting space. But I do keep seeing real estate projects, and that now there, as you say, they were being done as security tokens, then utility tokens. Now they're calling them NFTs, and it's a bit like there's 2 court actions in the USA at the moment. Many people will be aware of the SEC versus Ripple, where they're talking about the XRP cryptocurrency and whether that's a security. So the Securities Exchange Commission is saying, yep, it's a security. Meanwhile, Binance's chief, CZ, is being prosecuted by the CFTC, which is the Commodities and Futures Trading Commission, I think it is the letters, who are saying that some of the cryptos he's involved in are commodities. So you got this whole thing where you got, I think it's in the USA, you've got some like 13 different regulators all staking a claim in crypto in some way as to whether it's a commodity, a future, a security, money, or whatever type thing. So yeah, that's why I tend to recommend to startups to not try and deal with the USA as one of their first geographies, because it's complicated. Oh, and then each state's got its own regulation as well, which I guess, Aaron, you'll be familiar. In the States, you've got the FDA, or obviously the FDA, Federal Drug Administration. You've then got CDC, the disease thing. You've then got NIH, National Institute of Health, but you've also got regional things as well, where each state's got its own regulators. And it's the same on the finance side of things. So it's a very complex market indeed. But yeah, good call, Stephen. That everyone talks about real estate. It's not that easy. Nick, sorry, you're about to add.
Yeah, I think real estate's pretty easy to do. You just got to get a Wyoming corporation where the shares of the corporation are created on the blockchain. I mean, that's the legislation that was passed, And, depending on how you're offering it and how many owners are going to be or whatever, these guys will try to regulate you, but you can own property offshore because the shares were never on paper. The shares are only on the blockchain. So that's a workaround. It's a Wyoming Corp.
Wyoming is quite crypto friendly, if I recall, compared to New York. Is that right?
Yeah. Caitlin used to come to the Bitcoin Center back in 2013, 2014, and she was from Wyoming, and she tried to donate Bitcoin to her university, and they wouldn't accept it. They said, they thought it was illegal to accept it.
Okay.
So she pushed that legislation, with what the heck was his name? Like 7 foot tall with a cowboy hat. I forgot his name, but they got that passed, and it's pretty good legislation to try to push elsewhere. The thing is, all these other jurisdictions, they hear the press. Back at the center, I would teach the reporters first. So, we pulled the reporters in, and I gave them free courses on what Bitcoin was, because if you don't do that, then they'll run amok with their stories, and they can only figure out the bad stuff of the world. If they, someone sold 7 stolen cows for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and that's that's crypto's fault, isn't it?
Yeah. And I said, well, someone stole all the Bitcoin from this guy, from this company. And I said, well, Billy the Kid robbed a lot of banks, but no one blamed the cash.
It's a bit like I remember, was it about a month ago, there was a big announcement by the FBI that I think the FBI and US Treasury, I think it was, had done a joint operation against Bitslato, and that was a crypto trading exchange used on the dark web. But primarily, they're prosecuting them because of the stuff they were doing on the dark web. But because there was a crypto connection in somewhere, it was like, we've taken down a major crypto exchange because it's all money laundering and illegal stuff. It's like it's kind of an aside. But I think you're right. It's an education type piece. Good point.
So I guess
it's all about education. Yeah.
Just briefly coming back to kind of that real estate point, and Nick's point is right. It's actually quite easy to actually create a token. Put a building in an SPV. One of the really big practical challenges with real estate kind of ownership in that way, of course, is who manages the physical asset and what is the governance of the physical asset. Who decides when it needs a new roof? Who agrees on the budget and who pays for that kind of thing. Really simple things like that. And that's where you kind of you have to step back into the real world, and you have to have some kind of mechanism where you have some kind of voting framework, some kind of governance frameworks, decision frameworks, and contracts with people to do stuff. And that's the other bit of it, which is often overlooked when people start talking about real estate on blockchain. So the stuff that seems to be getting more traction is actually real estate linked loans, which are relatively easy to create NFTs on the contracts, which then can be collateralized, and that seems to be the path and direction of travel currently that I can see as a trend. So groups like Centrifuge, Goldfinch, and that sort of thing, that's the path they're taking. So it's not really real estate on the blockchain. It's one aspect of real estate exposure in a tokenized form.
That's an interesting one, because I'm involved in a project which is around non-recourse based loans, which is kind of the other way around. That it's actually offering loans against crypto, but what you're describing is effectively loans against real estate. So you're collateralizing the real estate and offering a loan on that. Is that right?
So what's happening as I see it is that there is a company out there that's making loans to businesses that own property. Ordinarily, they might just hold those. In a traditional kind of banking world, they might go out and securitize those loans by putting them into an SPV and then selling on tranches of those as bonds in their own right. What's happening here is that companies are taking the loans, they're putting them in SPV, they're creating a non-fungible token, which is effectively a representation of the loan contract, and then they are putting that up as collateral against which they raise money. So you say, look, I've got this portfolio of NFT loans. I want you to, or the face value of the loan is.
How is the NFT redeemable in the ability to collect on the debt?
Well, so there will be an interest rate on the loan, on the collateral. There'll be an interest rate on the collateral, which is effectively a wash through from the loan. So, I think, and you're raising a very interesting point, Nick, which I think is that what happens if you get a default on the loan? Yeah. And then you need a mechanism whereby actually you can have an agreement as to what the kind of either the recovery or the process to get to kind of, to replace the collateral. Those are the kind of, that's the critical point. So up to the point where until there's a default, it all seems to work quite well. When I don't believe there has been a default yet, but I believe there is a mechanism where the service provider can actually replace the loan in the event of default. So they have a portfolio of loans. It's not just one loan you're taking exposure to, it's a number of them. So it's a portfolio of loans, and they have some rights to effectively.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't buy it.
That's effectively having the NFT as what's known as a first charge, isn't it?
That's very much akin to what different tranches of securitized debt are anyway.
Yep.
So it's not really that much different.
It's kind of I find it almost sad in a way that the original reason I got into crypto was it was a new way of doing finance. It was not debt based, all this kind of thing, and suddenly we're going down the route. That's the way nature goes, of having CDOs, CDSs.
Yeah, and this is a function of I think what kind of I raised a couple of weeks ago, which is that the reason these real world assets are attractive to people in the blockchain space is that the market is so gargantuan and so big that actually there's a chance that someone somewhere on the line they can actually make some money from it. Whereas if you keep it strictly in the in the pure crypto decentralized space, there's not enough critical mass to let those businesses survive. So in a way, it's quite understandable that they want to get into this real world stuff. But at the same time, there are complexities like we've just walked through, operational complexities, but then there are legal and regulatory complexities. And I'm not sure that the path to the future success here is yet been outlined and made clear.
I think it's good. Folks, I'm just conscious that the time has flown there. We've just ended up having what I found a really interesting discussion about a whole range of things. So I'm really sorry. I always try and close these off reasonably on time and that. So I just want to say thank you very much for everyone coming along today, but very much appreciated. Nick, great to hear you. Looks like you're strolling around somewhere kind of cool at the moment. Was that Dubai by any chance, or Abu Dhabi or somewhere? Oh, he's on mute at the moment, but he's clearly having a lot of fun. It's late in the evening.
I can't give my location away.
That's fair enough. I noticed some writing in the background, but I won't say anything. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. It's really, really good. Steve,
well, they have Arabic on the walls, yes.
Yeah,
Arabic
exactly.
on the walls.
Yeah. That could be somewhere in London.
I'm also walking into a Denny's.
that definitely narrows it down there. Nick, again, thanks for joining us. That was awesome. Stephen, thanks very much for really great insights there as well, and Aaron as well. Keep on playing on with the self-prescribing type stuff. Hopefully we'll all talk again. Have a great day. See you around, everybody.
Thank you
very much.
Bye.